I think it's 8 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 15th, 2022 meeting of the Indianapolis Airport Authority. Call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is I'm going to have a roll call vote, Lisa.
Yes. Good morning, board members. Barbara Glass,
Here.
Steve Dillinger,
Here.
Raymond Powers,
Here.
Hi Mayman,
Aye.
Kurt Slater,
Here.
Jeffrey Gaither,
Here.
Matthew Whetstone.
Aye.
Good morning. Kathy Davis,
Here.
Brett Voorhees,
Here.
Ryan Goodwin,
Here.
Tamika Catchings. And for the record, Brian Toohey, IA Board Counsel is present. And for the record, Toby McClamrock is not attending today.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the approval of the minutes of the June 17th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Second. 8:31 through 8:60.
Do we have any discussion?
8:30, you may line up in numerical order against the right.
Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
23.
Roll call vote, Barbara Glass,
Aye.
Steve Dillinger,
Aye.
Raymond Powers,
Aye.
Kurt Slater,
Aye.
Jeff Gaither,
Aye.
Matt Whetstone,
Aye.
Kathy Davis,
Aye.
Brett Voorhees,
Aye.
Ryan Goodwin,
Aye.
Tamika Catchings. You have unanimous approval.
Thank you. Next, the presentation and public hearing of the 2023 budget ordinance number 02-2022. Robert Thompson.
Morning, Madam President, esteemed board members, colleagues, and those from the public joining us here and virtually. I have 14 slides to go over with you. Go through what we spent 2.5 hours with the Finance and Audit Committee. Ultimately, that 2.5 hours yielded really good discussion and approval to come and present this to you. So know that that's how we get here. Go to the next slide. I want to create a backdrop for two things. We learned some lessons in 2020. And one of those lessons was the importance of liquidity. The end goal that I want to have, so if I can put and say this is a backdrop, I'm painting a color behind me, is that we are well positioned with liquidity. And the rating agencies continue to recognize. So it is something that we focus on, and it gives us the ability then to be strategic. That's how we craft the finances of the authority. We're putting things in balance. You'll see that later, how some of the other items that we've done are in balance. Go to the next slide. One of the things that we had to contend with this budget, and everybody's contending with, is economic volatility. You can't see it because our picture is covering the last part of the graph. But back in February, now it's no longer, look at that, that was one. Back in February, we had to start to think in terms of what are we going to see with price escalation. We started to see that that was a reality. And we said that 9% would be a rational and reasonable basis to plan our budget. Well, we just exceeded 9% with what was released on Tuesday, or Wednesday. So the budget, what I want to let you know is it's materially correct. At least the basis of it is, because we were anticipating this. So now we've got these two backdrops that I wanted you to understand. We're well positioned, and I think we're materially correct with what was and is proposed. If you can go to the next slide. An end result. We have an index that we look at, which is cost per enplanement. The cost per enplanement is a metric, and it's a way for us to look at how are the passenger carriers ultimately all costs, how's it impacting? And we have a very reasonable and comparable rate that we're proposing. And as a result, this is a result of everything that goes into all the assumptions, all the revenue assumptions, all the expense assumptions, and the passenger assumptions. When I said that we're focused on multiple things that balance each other, having liquidity is one, and having reasonable and comparable rates is another one of those. And as you'll see as we go forward, one of the other objectives is to ensure we're investing in our assets. So these things all balance each other and they're actually in tension with each other. You can go to the next slide. We look at the landing fees of the airfield and we identify them separately because the passenger carriers utilize all the assets. Cargo carrier that we have, FedEx, mainly, we have other programs. They are impacted really only by the airfield rate. So you say, wow, it went up. Why would it go up? It was planned to go up. We had debt service from the original midfield expansion program that happened from 2004 to 8. There was planned debt service increases. So we are paying more principal through how that debt service profile was crafted. We also, in 2017 and 18, invested, through 19, I guess, invested in our airfield with the environmental investments of our stormwater expansion. There's principal now coming online for that. So we're paying principal every year, and I'll get to demonstrate that to you later in this presentation. So this is expected, and it is what is the result of all of that, mainly that principle. So we can go to the next slide. So these are the drivers of the appropriation. And if, as you know, the appropriation is about a max spending limit. That's what we establish. We have two funds. Airport System Fund has all of our operating expenses and our debt service. It's all together. And then we have our capital fund. The main drivers of the expenses in the Airport System Fund are that increase in debt service. Increase in debt service, just the principal part went up 22%. So it's not like a home mortgage when you just pay and it kind of, you pay less interest less interest and more principal as you go on. You actually pick the years when you're doing municipal debt that you're gonna pay principal off. So that's why it can be lumpy. And it's a little lumpy. There was a little bit more of that. And we brought some new principal on with the stormwater system. That's a significant driver. Personal services, two big things drive that. We insourced this whole strategic effort of public safety. So we had the PSO program. Al Stovall got up late last year, early this year, and identified that. As well as we established an $18 minimum for any position in the authority. And we were already doing that, thinking that way before we were looking at 9%. But that's the big things. We spent a lot of time going over detail, bridge with Finance and Audit Committee, answered a lot of questions. But that's what's driving the airport system. Now I'll go to the capital improvement fund. If you look at the first line, we're not proposing a lot of new projects. Really what 2023 is the completion of a lot of projects that have already been approved and have started, or will start this year. But when you have a multi-year project, you have to appropriate for the next year. You don't appropriate every year out. So we'll hit the big ones. We're gonna look at 5 projects that represent 66% of the total capital fund. I think it's really important to understand what are these big items that we're doing to improve and make sure we have the assets that meet the needs that are not unsafe. So one of the biggest ones we know, if you go to the next one, next slide, Matt, is the airfield and the runway reconstruction. So the biggest project we're undertaking, phase 2 ultimately is what we're doing right now. That happened because of the way the federal government supported this project. So by supporting that big middle section first, it made sense to pursue it first. We're doing that this year. If you go out, you see almost looks like Egypt out there, all these little pyramids of stuff. It's a big sandbox, as Jared calls it. Phase 1 will occur next year. And between those two phases, we're going to talk about debt related to this later in this presentation as well. So I'll be able to demonstrate the debt that we will be considering as it relates to phases. Can you go to the next slide? Parking garage expansion. I believe it was last meeting we approved, or the board approved, that would move forward. So that project will start this year. and it will be significantly constructed next. That's 55.3 million of that total 247 million appropriation. Next slide, please. The baggage system. The baggage system, I went and counted it up. It's going to be 15 years old next year. We know that there is TSA required changes to the system, and those changes are what are causing us to have to look at the whole system to ensure that it can handle the new equipment, but then have growth for the future. And it's a big system. Why put the pictures? See, it's not just one belt going through it. It's a massive system. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the completion of the snow equipment removal, storage, and airfield maintenance facility, the complex. So we placed the building in service in 2021. I put a thing around that. But what we need to complete the salt storage, which is up on the right-hand corner, provide a new access to it to ensure safety and efficiency and expediency in an event, meaning a snow event. Because right now they come through and they mix with all this other traffic. It creates a big congestion, and it will give them more capacity. Right next to that is the fuel farm, and we store and use quite a bit of fuel for all of those activities. That whole system and the tanks and everything will be replaced. Go straight down, and that's the acetate storage. And then go over to the left at the bottom, and that is a basically truck to dock type transfer. And we have a lot of trucks that offload, and so they would offload on that. So that is this project, and we were going to do it over multiple years and have it all split up. And when they tried to bid those, that wasn't enticing in the market. So we've put them all together, and we're going to pursue them all as. Next slide, please. And then finally, a project that the airlines and the airport have been talking about that is needed is an expansion of our belly cargo building. So this is used by the passenger carriers, and this is where they transfer their belly cargo through, store them, and do that. Next slide. Let's get to the details. So I had 3 lines on that capital. The new projects, the most significant one is investing in ensuring that the terminal does not face disruption if there were something to happen between Central Energy Plant and here. We don't want to have where this terminal is not available to provide the service that we are expected to provide. That's the biggest one on there. And then we go everything else, you just look. Make sure we're rehabilitating pavement, that we're managing our stormwater facilities. We're reconstructing taxiways. We're investing in making sure that we have low emission vehicles, and we have the capacity to buy those. And those are, when we see Vail, that's a federal program. We have to have an appropriation to be able to procure that if we are able to procure those funds. So that's 22.3 million. We can go to the next slide. Here's the large carryover. And we just talked about those. Look at the top 5. Reconstruct the runway, parking garage, baggage handling, airfield maintenance, and the cargo building. We can look at the next ones. Remain overnight parking. That's the positions that are being built right now over on the south side of the apron. We are rehabilitating the public parking lots. When you leave, look over to your left, look to the south, and you'll see that the employee lot in that first lot, you'll see that it's all brand new asphalt, and other projects that are currently undergoing will go forward. And then we always have some stuff we just don't get done this year. And talked to Jared about that. He feels good still with the 8.9 million, but that's what that is. That is just so that we just can't get it that exact. You go to the next slide. I wanted to talk about debt. The next ordinance that we'll discuss, we're going to introduce an ordinance And instead of doing two presentations, I would connect them because that's just a tool to facilitate strategy in the budget. Really what it is. So I wanted to give context for that ordinance. The garage expansion, so the first column, that's what is in the budget for next year, but a couple of years to build these. So as I looked at what makes the most sense, working with the bond bank, Indianapolis Local Improvement Bond Bank, to size and to look at, because we'll issue through them, conduit issue, but we're gonna do a public market bond later this year for the costs we're incurring this year and the ones we expect next year. We're in a rising interest rate environment. So that's what makes sense to be in that window. So the right now, the projected debt that would be issued would fund 100% of the garage expansion. That is funded with customer security charge revenues. Talked about that. What we ultimately have is 3 floors of that 5 floors being dedicated to car rentals and 2 floors for public parking. It has a funding source. I described to the Finance and Audit Committee, the debt service, the way we'll do that is ensure that there's enough margin of expected revenues to the debt service plan that we don't ever get into a position where we don't have CFC to pay for that expected debt service. The runway, phase 1 and 2, you saw what those 2 phases are after federal grants, so significantly funded with federal grants, but would be expected to issue $52 million related to that. A 30-year asset. The other thing I want to really have you guys think about, what is the life of the things we're investing in? That's why debt makes sense to do this. So this isn't like buying something that only has a 1-year life and you're going to pay for it. This is a 30+ year. I've seen 40 years in some different things. Airfield maintenance building, that was that campus finish. That's got 30-year type life. Terminal aircraft parking. It's the same type. It's concrete. It provides us the ability to accept more and have more overnight. That's our constraint right now. Nowhere to put any additional aircraft, be able to have more flights AM. Terminal backup heating and cooling. We talked about the importance of that. Those are all 30-year type things. So that's 94% of this debt. Public parking lots, I'd say that we usually get about 15 to 18 years of life out of that. And that's how the debt service profile will be amortized as it relates to that 10 million. But that's going to be, and you have some other things you got to deal with when you issue municipal debt. You have to set up a reserve. It's required. You end up having cost of issuance. And then if we borrow this in the fall, we'll have some interest. Can't start charging the rate base. The other thing that I wanted to identify is that all those items that are in the center, there's a cost recovery mechanism for those that's direct. So, but we don't start charging the rate base until the project's in service. So we got to borrow to pay the interest during that time. Let's just say it's 20%. These numbers will get refined as we go forward with the actual spend down schedules and that. But 195 million right now is what's in the draft ordinance. I want to put this in context. $195 million is a lot of money. Like, wow. Go to the next slide, please. Realize we are paying down debt every year. So right now we have $811 million of outstanding car bonds. We're going to propose $195 million issue. The outstanding par then would be at $1.06 billion. So $1 billion of debt. In the next 4 years, that's the already scheduled. We know what the principal is going to be because we have amortization of that. We're going to be back at the beginning of 2026 where we started. So I think that's helpful to understand that this isn't just piling on. This terminal is going to be 15 years old. We're going to have to invest. You're going to continue to see investment needing to be made. And think about it, at the end of at the beginning of 2026, we'll have $195 million of assets that have basically a 26+ year useful life. So that's the way that we have to keep investing, making sure that the assets are relevant and that they're safe. So the next slide is just celebrating our decade of excellence and setting up the ability for any questions to be asked. Are there any questions? Well, thank you very much. And then I think we go into a public hearing.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, I'd like to open the public hearing in this matter. First, Jonathan, have we received any public comments on the email?
No, we have not.
Okay. So the public hearing is open. Do we have any comments? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. We'll move on to the next, which is the introduction of general ordinance number 03-2022. Robert Thompson again.
General Ordinance 3/2022, a supplement to the IA's Master Bond Ordinance 5/2014 of the Indianapolis Airport Authority concerning the airport's issuance of one or more series of additional revenue bonds designated Indianapolis Airport Authority revenue bonds to fund various capital projects in the authority's approved capital budget and to fund one or more reserve accounts for the bonds as more particularly described in the board memo. Thank you.
Right, that has been introduced. Thank you, Robert. I do not have a report this month. So next, we'll move on to the official actions. EP 2022-07-03. Jared.
Thank you. Consider for approval an award of contracts for AOA fence at the former Clarion Hotel site at the Indianapolis International Airport to Evans Development Company, Inc., in an amount not to exceed $780,273, plus a 10% construction reserve of $78,027.30 for a total amount of $858,300.30. Evans Development Company was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Supplier diversity participation is MBE 0.83% with CRIPE and WBE at 3.97% with a combination of Protection Plus, Kopetsky's Triax, and Indiana Sign and Barricade. So as I think most of you are aware, we have removed the old Clarion Hotel and that site needs to be fenced in and become part of the airfield. And with that, there's some modification to some of the airfield access gates. So that's the overall scope of the project.
Hey, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call.
Roll call, Barbara Glass,
Aye.
Steve Dillinger,
Aye.
Raymond Powers,
Aye.
Kurt Schlater,
Aye.
Jeffrey Gaither,
Aye.
Matt Whetstone,
Aye.
Kathy Davis,
Aye.
Brett Voorhees,
Aye.
Brian Goodwin,
Aye.
Mika Catchings.
Aye.
You have unanimous approval.
Thank you. EP 2022-07-04.
Consider for approval a professional services contract with Burns and McDonnell Engineering Company for Central Energy Plant boiler rebuild at the Indianapolis International Airport in an amount not to exceed $779,652. The supplier diversity participation is MBE 15.91%, utilizing CMID, and WBE 30.49%, utilizing reprographics and advanced engineering consultants. So this project will entail the rebuild of 2 of the 4 boilers at the Central Energy facility, which I believe everyone's aware supplies all of the heating and cooling for the terminal.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the roll call.
Barbara Glass,
Aye.
Steve Dillinger,
Aye.
Raymond Powers,
Aye.
Kurt Schlater,
Aye.
Jeff Gaither,
Aye.
Matt Whetstone,
Aye.
Kathy Davis,
Aye.
Brett Voorhees,
Aye.
Brian Goodwin,
Aye.
Tamika Catchings. You have unanimous approval.
BP 2022-07-05. Jared.
Consider for approval change order number 1, which is a final and balancing change order with 5 Star Company Incorporated for runway 15 obstruction removal at the Indianapolis Metropolitan Airport in an amount not to exceed $38,901.12. Supplier diversity participation on the change order is WBE 41.15% with Bush Landscaping. So the need for the change order was that the work was started in the wintertime, and as it went into spring, we had to put additional environmental controls, erosion control, those types of things. So this was a request of additional scope by the airport.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Barb Glass,
Aye.
Steve Dillinger,
Aye.
Raymond Powers,
Aye.
Kurt Schlater,
Aye.
Jeff Gaither,
Aye.
Matt Whetstone,
Aye.
Kathy Davis,
Aye.
Brett Voorhees,
Aye.
Ryan Goodwin,
Aye.
Tamika Catchings. Give unanimous approval.
Next, we have our executive director's report. Mario Rodriguez.
Good morning, President, members of the board. Let me turn it over to Keith Berlin so he could introduce our new chief of police. Keith?
Thank you, Mario. Madam President, members of the board, good morning. I'm pleased to introduce, we have a new police chief here at the airport. It's Ted Freeze, who's in attendance today. Ted has a long history of public safety experience to the citizens of Indianapolis and central Indiana. He's been over 34 years in various roles with the city of Indianapolis. In the last 5.5 years, he had been employed with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as the director of security, serving visitors, race fans, teams, anybody who visited that facility. And we're tickled to death to have Chief Freeze as part of the Airport Authority team. And Chief, anything you'd like to say? Welcome to the team.
Thanks, Keith, and good morning. Just super happy to be here. Well, excited for the future of the airport.
Thanks, Chief.
Well, I'll bring your attention to the next item, which is the introduction of Victor Creed, our IUPUI Peterson Fellow, who is right behind me. And we have it in the write-up, and it's detailed some of his background, but on a personal, he's been invaluable to us in public affairs and several other departments. And this is such a great program. And not only is he learning from us, we're actually learning from him. And we're getting to get a lot of valuable work from a very intelligent and thoughtful person. The MOU between the city of India, between IA and the town of Plainfield is attached, and the write-up is there. Also, the Andretti Motorsport update is in your write-up. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Keith so he could go over the Apex exercise.
Thank you, Mario. Yeah, on June 8th of this year, the airport conducted our Apex drill, our airport preparedness exercise. It's a requirement that the FAA puts on air carrier airports such as ours. We have to do this every 3 years. We have a plan review every year, but we actually have to have a full-blown exercise on the airport every 3 years. We had over 30 public safety agencies from around Indianapolis and central Indiana participate, with well over 100 of our own employees taking part in the event. We'd like to put a shout out or thank you to Vincennes University. Vincennes has a facility here on the airport, has always been a great partner with us, and actually let us use one of their aircraft as part of the drill. So this is a fire simulator, a training device that we brought in that gives our teams and other public safety teams from around the area some experience in actually fighting fires on the airport. So at what most of the morning, we got a lot of good feedback from our teams, and we had external evaluators come in and look at our plans and our drill, and it went very well. And we'll be having the next one in 2025.
Thank you, Keith. President, members of the board, that concludes our reports.
Thank you, Mario. Our next meeting is Friday, August 19th, 2022 at 8 a.m. With that, the meeting is adjourned.